Most people will flash you a booking screenshot or tell you that they made 6 figures with Airbnb, but they never show you the actual breakdown. When I launched my very first Airbnb, I never thought that it would snowball this big. Fast forward a couple of years, I now manage over 35 Airbnb properties that generate me over $200,000 every month. But instead of giving you vague averages, I'm going to break down my actual portfolio piece by piece. What my 2 bedrooms make, what my 3 bedrooms actually net, the expenses that most beginners forget, and the actual systems that keep it all running. So if you ever wondered what a $200,000 per month Airbnb business looks like from the inside, let's jump straight into it. Okay, so starting off with a simple overview of my entire Airbnb portfolio, I have in total 35 Airbnb properties that I'm managing to this day using rental arbitrage, and they're all located in the city of Melbourne. So that includes suburbs like South Bank, Docklands, Port Melbourne, and South Melbourne as well. So this is the property mix. We have 7 studio/1 bedroom apartments, 22 2-bedroom apartments, 5 3-bedroom apartments, and 1 4-bedroom townhouse. And so it's pretty obvious that the majority of my property type is apartments and I only have 1 townhouse. But the only reason for this is because there's such a huge supply of apartments within the city and the surrounding suburbs because of the population density. However, Airbnb arbitrage works for all property types. I know operators out there with townhouses, with houses that are all performing well. I just personally stuck to an area to make my operations more smooth and more seamless, and therefore I picked up majority apartments over townhouses and houses. And the other thing you'll notice with my portfolio is that the majority are 2-bedroom apartments. Now the particular reason for this one is because if you look at the real estate market when it comes to apartments, you'll find that there is a higher supply of 2-bedroom apartments, and therefore it's easier to acquire them. But do 2 bedrooms make the most profit? Actually, no, but we'll dive into that in a second. Let me walk you guys through what property types do better. Do 1 bedrooms do better? Do 2 bedrooms do better? Or maybe 3 or 4 bedrooms? What I found with my particular portfolio is that 2 bedrooms are bread and butter units. They don't yield the most profit, but they are reliable and there is a good demand for them. What I noticed is that 1 bedroom and studio apartments make the least profit in general. This is usually because you're competing against hotel conglomerates who have a mass supply of 1 bedrooms and also great service and great prices as well. And because you're competing against so many hotels, the demand for your particular properties will go down and therefore prices will go down. However, that isn't to say that studio or 1 bedrooms don't make profit. They definitely do, and they definitely still are in demand and they still get filled out. Now the property type that makes the most profit in my portfolio are actually 3 bedrooms. 3 bedrooms are harder to acquire, and because they're harder to acquire, the supply is lower and obviously the prices will go up. 3 bedrooms are great for family stays, big groups traveling, corporate workers. Now I only have 1 4-bedroom townhouse in my portfolio, which is the property I'm actually sitting in right now, by the way. This is the living area. It's quite a nice property, pretty premium. It is located in Port Melbourne. This property in particular generates very good money, but I wouldn't say the margins are as good as a 3-bedroom because the rental price is higher. Now I want to quickly note that me saying a 2-bedroom makes more than a 1-bedroom and a 3-bedroom makes more than a 2-bedroom is just a general rule of thumb. Of course, it always comes back to what rental price you are paying to the landlord and what is your actual expense obligation every single month. Because although you may be generating $80,000 a year on average for a 2-bedroom apartment, some 2-bedroom apartments you might acquire maybe $600 a week in rent or $700 a week in rent. And therefore it depends on the deal and the lease that you're actually signing. So that's why I always say that if you can negotiate your rental price, then do so. Try and lower your rental obligation as much as possible so that your margins will go up. For instance, the majority of our 2-bedroom apartments are around $700 to $750 per week. So there's a particular example I want to show you guys that I have up on screen here. This is a property that we acquired in a building in Docklands that was relatively old. However, the rental price for this property was only $550 a week for a 2-bedroom apartment when we signed this lease, which is extremely below market, and we knew we had to take it even though the property was a little bit in older condition. And this property surprisingly generates the exact same as all the other 2-bedroom apartments. As you can see, this building actually offers a rooftop pool, which is a really good amenity to offer in our Airbnb listings and our titles. And that's the standout feature of these properties that I believe is the reason why we're so profitable on this investment. So after finding this out, we actually acquired more units in the same building at relatively low rental prices as well. And that building is probably one of our most profitable investments in our portfolio. Now we have about 9 units in that building, and they're all generating the same as our other apartments, but our rental obligation to the landlords is much less, and therefore our margins are much higher. But of course, the part that you guys care about isn't actually the portfolio, it's the money. So let's break down exactly what these properties are making. And I put these numbers in this spreadsheet so that I can show you exactly how much revenue they're bringing in, what our expenses are, their net profit, and their profit margin as well. So you can get a clear understanding of my portfolio and exactly the numbers that these properties are generating. So first and foremost, I've only put in the properties that have been with us for the last 365 days so that we can get an accurate understanding of the numbers. And that also captures all the seasonality trends throughout the entire year as well. So for 1 bedrooms, we have 2 properties. Now I know this spreadsheet looks a little bit overwhelming at first, but I'll break it down in a second. I'll put their total revenue here. That's before the Airbnb commission fee, which is 15% plus GST. And the total payout is taken directly from my property management system and reflects the actual payout amount that was sent to our bank account. Moving on, we have guest fees. This is the cleaning fee that's charged directly onto the guest. However, we actually mark this up and actually make a margin on it. So in actuality, the actual cleaning expense is about 80% of the guest fee that was charged onto the guest, which is why I have marked it down in this spreadsheet. Then we have utilities, which I couldn't be bothered going through and actually finding all the invoices that we were charged. So instead, I just estimated $300 a month per property. And then the rent that we pay, I've taken the individual rental amounts for every single property in this spreadsheet, and I've put their annual rental obligation right here. And then I put miscellaneous here for things like small repairs and any call outs or things like that for the properties. And I've just put a flat one of 2,000 there. Okay, so breaking it down, we can clearly see that 1 bedrooms make the least amount of net profit, which is to be expected for the reasons that I described earlier, competition with hotels and things like that. 2 bedrooms make a good amount of profit, but not as much as 3-bedroom apartments. However, you can see that the profit margins for 2 and 3 bedrooms are roughly the same, but for 1 bedrooms, the margin is a little bit lower. Okay, I also wanted to highlight this one particular property right here. And it's also the same property that I showed the Airbnb listing for before. As you can see, this property generated about the same revenue as the other 2-bedroom apartments in the portfolio. However, the rent that we pay for this property is cheaper than the others. And therefore the profit margin is the best in the entire portfolio actually. It's just an interesting one. So from this spreadsheet, I hope this gives a good understanding of how much 1 bedrooms net, how much 2 bedrooms net, and 3 bedrooms, and so on. I'll leave this resource in the description below so that you can download it and have a look for yourself as well. This is also another resource that I made for my students probably about 6 months ago now. But as you can see, I've also broken down in this spreadsheet the expense split so that you can see how much percentage of outgoings is going to rent, the OTA commission fee, the cleaning expense, utilities, and small maintenance and repairs. For almost all of the time, your biggest expense is going to be rent. That's about 40 to 50 or 55%. And then there's an OTA commission fee, which is 15% plus GST. Cleaning expense is usually about 8 to 11%. And utilities make up about 5% of the outgoings. And finally, small repairs and maintenance is about 2%. But none of this happened overnight. Let me rewind and show you exactly how the portfolio scaled from property number 1 to $200,000 per month. We picked up our first property in June 2023. And right after that, it only took us 2 weeks to pick up our second property. And so by the end of year 1, we had scaled to 10 units, pulling in $70,000 a month in revenue. And in year 2, we reinvested the profits to scale to 30 plus units. The first property is always the hardest hurdle. After that, the momentum takes over. And because you have proof of track record and proof of concept, it's easier to pick up your second property and then your third and your fourth and so on. I've seen many people scale fast and others take a little bit longer. The difference between the two is in effort and consistency. It is not luck. Some people give up before they even get their first property. When you're out there searching for your first property and you're looking for that one agent or one landlord that will actually say yes, you're gonna get hit by a lot of rejections. So make sure you're ready for them. But remember this, every single no is bringing you closer and closer to a yes. You only lose if you just stop dialing and stop talking to agents and stop building connections. And here's the biggest lesson that I've learned from running and managing a $200,000 a month Airbnb business. Success in this space equals systems, consistency, and reinvestment. $200,000 a month in revenue sounds huge, but the net profit is only 20 to 30%. And most of that profits gets rolled back into furniture, back into new leases, and overall just scaling and growing the business. And here's the mindset shift that I needed to go through to actually become successful. Year one isn't about getting rich quick. It's not even about pocketing profits. It's about building leverage for year two, year three, and so on. Your first $10,000 a month in any business is just you purely outworking the competition. And that's why $10,000 a month is the hardest hurdle to hit. After $10,000 a month is about systems, it's about implementing staff, it's about building an actual team so that you can focus on scale and growth. The sweet spot for beginners is usually about 2 to 4 properties. This gives you strong income without being overwhelmed before you need to implement full systems and hire VAs and teams and things like that. I know a lot of people that are comfortable at this level and clean by themselves even to just pocket the extra revenue. And that is a perfectly fine strategy, but it isn't going to give you financial freedom because you're still trading your time for money. Albeit a lot more money than if you were to work a 9-to-5 job at minimum wage or even at corporate jobs, but it's still not financial freedom. I built this business in my early 20s, and if I can scale it, then anyone can, but only if you operate like a professional. So that's the reality of my business. $200,000 a month, 20 to 30% profit margins. I scaled through reinvestment, and I run with systems instead of stress. Now you've got two choices. You can keep watching videos, taking notes, and let another year go by without making that first landlord call. Or you can take action. Your first property could come in the next 48 hours. Your first $10,000 a month could be only 60 days away. If you want me in your corner showing you exactly how to do it, there's a link below to apply for mentorship. But whether you join or not, don't waste another year on the sidelines. Start now.